Welcome back to Strides to Solutions. I'm Esther Adams, and today we're exploring groundbreaking neuroscience research that reveals how working with horses creates measurable changes in brain function, particularly in areas responsible for attention, impulse control, and executive function. This isn't just about feeling better, it's about actual neurological rewiring that's helping children with ADHD, autism, and other neurodivergent conditions in ways that traditional therapies sometimes cannot. The research we're examining comes from functional brain imaging studies that can literally see what happens inside a child's brain when they interact with horses. What they're finding challenges our assumptions about how cognitive improvement occurs and offers hope for millions of families dealing with attention and learning challenges. Let me start with the most striking finding. Children participating in equine assisted activities show increased activation in the right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, one of the brain's most crucial regions for attention and impulse control. This is the same area that often functions differently in people with ADHD, and researchers can now measure how horse interaction literally lights up these neural circuits. The imaging studies use something called functional near infrared spectroscopy, which measures blood flow and oxygenation in specific brain regions during activities. When children work with horses, researchers see increased oxyhemoglobin levels in the prefrontal cortex, indicating enhanced neural activity, exactly where we'd want to see improvement for attention and cognitive control. But here's what makes this particularly compelling. These brain changes correlate with actual performance improvements on cognitive tasks. Children who showed greater prefrontal activation during horse activities also demonstrated better inhibitory control, the ability to stop themselves from impulsive responses and think before acting. This suggests that equine assisted activities aren't just providing temporary behavioral management or emotional support. They're actually training the brain circuits responsible for the core deficits we see in ADHD and related conditions. The research on optimal cognitive load offers another piece of the puzzle. Working with horses creates what researchers call positive emotional arousal, measurable increases in skin conductance that indicate heightened attention and engagement, but without the overwhelming stress that can shut down learning. This arousal level appears to be crucial for neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections and strengthen existing ones. Too little arousal, and the brain doesn't change. Too much arousal, and the stress response interferes with learning. Horse interaction seems to hit a sweet spot that maximizes the brain's capacity for adaptive change. The emotional component is particularly important when we consider how different this is from traditional cognitive training. Most attention training programs try to isolate specific cognitive functions, working memory, sustained attention, inhibitory control, and drill them in abstract computerized tasks. Horse based interventions work differently. They embed cognitive challenges within emotionally meaningful, physically engaging, real world activities that require multiple brain systems to work together simultaneously. You can't successfully ask a horse to perform a task without coordinating attention, emotional regulation, motor control, and social awareness all at once. This integrated approach may explain why equine interventions often outperform traditional cognitive training programs. Instead of trying to strengthen isolated cognitive functions, they're training the whole neural network that supports real world executive function. The neurochemical research adds another layer to this understanding. While direct measurement in equine studies is still limited, related research strongly suggests that human animal interactions trigger the release of oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, while simultaneously reducing cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Oxytocin does more than just make us feel good. It enhances social attention, improves emotional regulation, and facilitates learning and memory formation. For children with autism or ADHD, who often struggle with social attention and emotional regulation, this neurochemical boost could be particularly beneficial. The cortisol reduction is equally important. Chronic stress impairs prefrontal cortex function and interferes with the very cognitive abilities we're trying to improve. By reducing stress while simultaneously providing cognitive challenges, horse interaction creates optimal conditions for brain training. But let's examine what the research actually shows versus what we might hope it shows. The brain imaging studies are compelling, but they're still relatively small scale and short term. We can see increased prefrontal activation during horse activities, but we don't yet know how long these changes persist or whether they generalize to other contexts. The behavioral studies show more robust evidence. Multiple randomized controlled trials demonstrate that children with ADHD show significant improvements in attention, executive function, and working memory after 8 to 12 weeks of equine-assisted therapy. These improvements are often comparable to or better than traditional interventions, and they appear to be particularly strong for children who don't respond well to medication or standard therapies. However, most studies only measure outcomes immediately after the intervention period. We have limited data on whether these cognitive improvements persist months or years later, which is crucial for understanding the true therapeutic value. The comparative research reveals some intriguing patterns. Children who participate in combined programs involving grooming, groundwork, and riding tend to show the strongest and most consistent improvements. This suggests that variety and complexity in the horse human interaction may be important for maximizing cognitive benefits. Programs that focus only on riding or only on ground activities show more mixed results, though both can be beneficial. This makes sense from a neuroscience perspective. Different types of activities likely challenge different neural circuits, and combining them may provide more comprehensive brain training. The individual differences research reveals that not all children respond equally well to equine interventions. Age appears to matter significantly. Children between 6 and 14 show the strongest cognitive improvements, possibly because their brains are in optimal periods for neuroplasticity. Diagnosis also influences outcomes. Children with ADHD often show robust improvements in executive function and working memory. Children with autism tend to benefit more in social functioning and communication, with more variable effects on attention and memory. Children with cerebral palsy, who also have attention difficulties, can see improvements in both cognitive and motor domains. But perhaps most importantly, baseline severity and individual engagement predict outcomes. Children with moderate rather than severe symptoms and those who show genuine interest and engagement with the horses tend to experience the greatest cognitive gains. This last point raises important questions about mechanism. Is it the horse interaction itself that creates brain changes, or is it the motivation and engagement that horses inspire in certain children? The answer is probably both. Horses may be uniquely effective at capturing and sustaining the kind of motivated attention that drives neuroplasticity. The sensory integration aspect also appears crucial. Working with horses involves complex multisensory processing, visual attention to the horse's body language, auditory processing of sounds and instructions, tactile input from touching and riding, vestibular stimulation from mounted activities, and proprioceptive awareness of body position and movement. This rich sensory environment may help reorganize neural networks in ways that more limited interventions cannot. For children with sensory processing difficulties, common in both ADHD and autism, this integration may be particularly therapeutic. The social cognition component adds another dimension. Horses are social animals with complex emotional lives, but they're also non-judgmental and consistent in ways that human social partners may not be. Learning to read horse body language, respond to their emotional states, and communicate effectively with them may strengthen the same neural circuits involved in human social cognition. For children with autism, who often struggle with reading social cues and understanding others' emotions, this may provide a safer, more predictable context for developing social cognitive skills that then generalize to human relationships. The executive function demands of horse care and interaction are also significant. planning a grooming routine, sequencing tasks like tacking up, monitoring safety while handling a large animal, and adjusting responses based on the horse's feedback all require the kind of real world executive function that's often impaired in ADHD. Unlike computerized cognitive training, these demands occur in meaningful contexts with immediate natural consequences. If you don't pay attention while leading a horse, they might stop or wander. If you don't regulate your emotions, the horse will respond to your tension. This natural feedback may be more effective than artificial rewards and consequences. However, we need to acknowledge some important limitations in the current research. Most studies focus on children and adolescents, with limited data on adult populations. The mechanisms that drive benefits in developing brains may not apply equally to mature nervous systems. The studies also predominantly involve relatively short term interventions, typically 8 to 16 weeks. While this is sufficient to demonstrate immediate benefits, we don't know whether longer programs would produce more lasting changes or whether booster sessions are needed to maintain improvements. There's also the question of specificity. Do these benefits require actual horses, or could other animals or even well designed virtual reality environments produce similar brain changes? Some research suggests that the size, power, and responsiveness of horses may be uniquely beneficial, but this remains an open question. The practical implications of this research are significant. For families dealing with ADHD, autism, or other neurodivergent conditions, equine assisted interventions represent a promising complement to traditional therapies. They're not likely to replace medication or behavioral interventions entirely, but they may provide unique benefits that other approaches cannot. For educators and therapists, understanding these neurobiological mechanisms could inform the design of more effective interventions. The principles of optimal arousal, multisensory integration, meaningful context, and natural feedback could potentially be applied to other therapeutic modalities. For the field of neurodivergence more broadly, this research challenges deficit based models that focus solely on what's wrong with different brains. Instead, it suggests that neurodivergent individuals may benefit from environments and activities that work with, rather than against, their neurological differences. The horses aren't fixing broken brains, they're providing contexts where different brains can function more optimally and develop their strengths. This represents a fundamentally different approach to supporting neurodivergent individuals, one that emphasizes environmental accommodation and strength based intervention rather than trying to normalize brain function. Looking forward, this research opens up exciting possibilities for precision medicine approaches to neurodivergence. As we better understand which individuals respond best to equine interventions and why, we may be able to predict who will benefit most and tailor interventions accordingly. Brain imaging could potentially be used to monitor intervention effectiveness in real time, allowing therapists to adjust approaches based on neurological response rather than just behavioral outcomes. The research also suggests possibilities for hybrid approaches that combine the neurobiological benefits of animal interaction with other evidence based interventions. Virtual reality environments that simulate animal interaction, robotic animals with responsive behaviors, or traditional therapies conducted in animal enriched environments might capture some of these benefits for people who can't access live animals. This has been Strides to Solutions. I'm Esther Adams, and thank you for joining me today.